The rushing waters of the Snake River clawed at Olivia Owens' skirts, dragging her beneath the surface as she gasped for one final desperate breath. The spring of 1878 had brought torrential rains to Wyoming territory, turning the normally manageable crossing into a deadly trap for the young schoolteacher who had misjudged both the current's strength and her horse's footing. Her arms flailed wildly as the powerful surge pulled her deeper, the weight of her sodden clothing and anchor drawing her toward the riverbed. Yards away on the western bank, Yates Kincaid saw the woman's horse rear and throw its rider into the churning waters. Without hesitation, he spurred his stallion forward, abandoning the cattle drive he'd been leading. As the woman disappeared beneath the foaming surface, Yates leapt from his mount, tearing off his gun belt and heavy coat. "Hold the herd," he shouted to his ranch hands before plunging into the icy current. The cold knocked the breath from his lungs, but Yates fought against the shock, powerful arms cutting through the water toward the spot where he'd last seen the woman's pale face. The murky depths revealed nothing at first, but then a flash of blue fabric, billowing like a ghost beneath the surface. Diving deeper, his lungs burning for air, Yates reached out and caught hold of her arm. She was limp, unmoving as he wrapped an arm around her waist and kicked hard toward the surface. Breaking through with a desperate gasp, he pulled her face above water, but her head lolled against his shoulder, lifeless. "No, no, no," he muttered, fighting the current as he dragged her toward the shoreline. His boots finally found purchase on the rocky riverbed, and he hauled her onto the muddy bank. Dropping to his knees beside her still form, Yates pushed the soaked hair from her face young, maybe 23 or so, with delicate features now blue-tinged and motionless. "Breathe," he commanded, turning her onto her side and pounding between her shoulder blades. Water dribbled from her lips, but she remained unresponsive. Desperate, remembering a technique he'd seen a physician use years before, Yates laid her flat, tilted her head back and pressed his mouth to hers, breathing his own air into her water-filled lungs. Again and again he breathed for her, pausing only to press against her chest, forcing the water out. "Come on," he urged, his own breath ragged as he continued the desperate effort. "Don't you die on me, miss." Just as the creeping certainty of failure began to take hold, the woman beneath him convulsed violently. She coughed, water spewing from her mouth as she gasped and choked, her body fighting for air. Yates quickly turned her onto her side, supporting her as she purged the river from her lungs. When her coughing subsided, she drew a shaky breath and her eyes fluttered open, deep brown eyes that locked onto his face with confusion and fear. "Easy now," Yates said, his voice gentler than it had been in years. "You're safe." "The river," she whispered hoarsely, trying to sit up. "Don't move just yet." He kept a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You nearly drowned." She blinked slowly, consciousness fully returning as she took in the tall, broad-shouldered man kneeling beside her. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, water dripping from his square jaw, green eyes intense with concern. "You saved me." Her voice was barely audible. "Just happened to be in the right place," he replied. "Name's Yates Kincaid." "Olivia Owens," she managed before another coughing fit overtook her from the western ridge. Shouting voices approached as Yates' ranch hands galloped toward them, leading his horse behind them. "Boss, she alive?" called out Curtis, his foreman, reining in his mount. "She is," Yates confirmed, not taking his eyes off Olivia. "But she needs shelter and dry clothes. We're taking her to town." "Truckie's just a few miles ahead," Curtis said. "We can make it before sundown if we push." Olivia tried again to rise, but dizziness overtook her and she swayed dangerously. Without hesitation, Yates swept her into his arms. "My horse," she protested weakly. My things. We'll find your horse, Yates assured her, nodding to one of his men to search downstream. Right now, we need to get you warm. He carried her to his stallion, lifting her carefully onto the saddle before mounting behind her. Her body trembled against his chest, her wet clothing offering no protection against the cool spring air. Here, he said, wrapping his duster around her shoulders. It was damp from the riverbank but would block the wind. Hold on to me. As they rode toward Truckee, Olivia drifted in and out of consciousness, her head resting against Yates' chest. He kept one strong arm around her waist, holding her secure against him. "Stay with me, Miss Owens," he murmured whenever he felt her slipping away. "Just a little farther." Truckee, California came into view as the sun began its descent behind the Sierra Nevada mountains. The small lumber town, nestled among towering pines, had grown with the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad 9 years earlier. Smoke rose from chimneys, and lanterns glowed in windows as Yates guided his horse down the main street. "The doctor," Olivia whispered, rousing herself. "Please." "That's where we're headed," he assured her, directing his men toward a small building with a weathered sign reading Dr. Thomas Walker, physician. The doctor, a gray-haired man in his 60s, rushed to the door at their approach. "What's happened here?" he demanded, eyes assessing the situation quickly. "River crossing gone wrong," Yates explained, dismounting and lifting Olivia down. "She was underwater for some time. I got her breathing again, but she needs care." Dr. Walker nodded briskly. "Bring her inside, Mrs. Walker," he called to his wife. "Prepare a bed and hot water bottles." Yates carried Olivia into the doctor's office, laying her gently on the examination table. Her eyes found his, fear evident in their depths. "Don't leave," she whispered, clutching weakly at his sleeve. Something in her gaze reached deep into his chest, touching a part of himself he'd thought long buried. "I'll be right outside," he promised. Mrs. Walker, a kind-faced woman with silver-streaked hair, bustled in with an armful of blankets. "Out now, young man. This girl needs dry clothes and proper tending." Reluctantly, Yates stepped outside, joining his men who waited in the street. "What about the herd?" Curtis asked, concern etched on his weathered face. Yates ran a hand through his damp hair, considering. The cattle drive to Sacramento couldn't be delayed long, but the thought of riding out while Olivia lay recovering didn't sit well with him. "Take them to the grazing land north of town," he decided. "We'll hold there for a day or two." Curtis raised an eyebrow but knew better than to question his boss. "Yes, sir. And the lady's horse. Keep looking. She mentioned having things with it, probably all she owns in the world." As his men rode out, Yates paced the doctor's porch, watching as lamps were lit inside. The town around him settled into evening routine, saloon doors swinging, miners and lumbermen making their way to dinner, shopkeepers closing up for the night. An hour passed before Dr. Walker emerged, wiping his hands on a cloth. "She'll live," he announced. "Lucky you were there, Mr. Kincaid." Another minute under that water. Yates nodded, relief washing over him. "Can I see her?" The doctor studied him for a moment, then shrugged. "Briefly. She needs rest, but she's been asking for you." Inside, Yates found Olivia propped up on pillows, her damp hair combed and braided, body wrapped in a flannel nightgown and thick quilt. Color had returned to her cheeks, though her face remained pale with exhaustion. "Mr. Kincaid," she greeted him, her voice stronger than before. "I believe I owe you my life." He removed his hat, suddenly conscious of his own damp, muddy appearance. "No debt owed, Miss Owens. Anyone would have done the same." A small smile crossed her lips. "We both know that's not true." Her eyes held his for a long moment before she continued, "Doctor Walker says you breathed for me. He says without that I would have died there on the riverbank." Yates shifted uncomfortably, unused to such directness. "Like I said, I just happened to be there. Providence, perhaps," she murmured. He cleared his throat. "My men are looking for your horse." "Was there anything particular we should watch for? To identify your belongings?" "A chestnut mare with a white blaze. My trunk would have been secured behind the saddle. It contains everything I own." Her voice caught slightly. "I'm to be the new schoolteacher in Truckee." "I was supposed to arrive yesterday." "Schoolteacher," Yates repeated, studying her with newfound understanding. "That explains the crossing. You were following the mail route," she nodded. "The stagecoach was full, so I decided to ride ahead. Foolish of me with the spring melt." "Brave," he corrected, "if a bit reckless." The hint of a smile softened his features. "Rest now. I'll have my men bring your things when they find them." "You're leaving?" Alarm flickered across her face. "Just to check on my cattle." "We're driving 500 head to Sacramento, but we'll graze north of town for a day or two." He hesitated. "I'll come back tomorrow if you'd like." The relief in her eyes was unmistakable. "I would like that very much, Mr. Kincaid." As promised, Yates returned the following morning, bringing news that his men had recovered Olivia's mare and belongings downstream. The horse had managed to escape the current and was found grazing nervously on the opposite bank. Her trunk, though soaked, had remained secured. Dr. Walker had moved Olivia to a small room in his home adjacent to the clinic, where Mrs. Walker could attend to her. When Yates arrived, he found Olivia sitting up in bed, color restored to her face, though dark circles remained beneath her eyes. "The mayor visited this morning," she told him after thanking him for recovering her possessions. "He was quite concerned about my delay, but relieved I survived. The school has been without a teacher for 3 months." Yates settled into a chair beside her bed. "What brings a young woman all the way from Philadelphia?" she supplied. "And the answer is simple enough: adventure, purpose, and perhaps a bit of escape." "Escape?" he inquired, noting how she quickly glanced away, "from expectations, from a life already planned out for me." Her fingers toyed with the edge of her quilt. "My parents wished me to marry a banking associate of my father's, a man 30 years my senior with grown children. When I refused, tensions grew unbearable." "So you ran to the frontier to teach children their letters?" A genuine smile lit her face. "I've always wanted to teach. And the West? Well, it called to me through books and newspaper accounts, a place where one might forge their own path." Yates found himself smiling in return. "It is that, though not always as romantic as those Eastern writers make it sound." "I'm learning that lesson rather quickly," she admitted with a soft laugh that dissolved into a cough. Mrs. Walker appeared in the doorway. "That's enough visiting for now. Miss Owens needs her rest if she's to recover properly." Rising, Yates placed his hat back on his head. "I'll return tomorrow. My men and I need to make preparations for continuing our drive." "You're leaving soon?" Olivia couldn't quite hide her disappointment. "In a day or two. The cattle won't wait, and we've contracts to fulfill in Sacramento." He paused at the door. "But I'll be back this way in a fortnight. Perhaps by then you'll be teaching those Truckee youngsters their sums." The next day, Yates brought Olivia a book he'd purchased from the general store, a collection of Mark Twain's stories he thought might amuse her during her recovery. Their conversation flowed more easily, ranging from his cattle ranch in Wyoming territory to her education at a women's college in Philadelphia. "My father never understood why a woman would need higher education," she confided. "He only allowed it because my mother insisted it would make me more appealing to potential husbands." "And did it?" Yates asked, finding himself surprisingly interested in her answer. Olivia's laugh was genuine. "It made me entirely unsuitable, according to most of Philadelphia society. I developed opinions, Mr. Kincaid, and the unfortunate habit of expressing them. "A dangerous quality indeed," he replied with a smile that transformed his usually stern features. On the third day, as Yates prepared to depart with his cattle drive, he found himself lingering at Olivia's bedside. Dr. Walker had pronounced her well enough to move to the boarding house where she would stay until more permanent accommodations could be arranged. "The school board is eager for me to begin next Monday," she told him. "Children have been running wild for months, according to the mayor's wife." "Are you certain you're strong enough?" Yates asked, concern evident in his voice. "Dr. Walker says fresh air and purpose are the best medicines now." She hesitated, then reached for his hand. "I cannot thank you enough, Mr. Kincaid, not just for saving my life, but for your kindness these past days." His large, calloused hand enveloped hers. "Yates," he corrected. "After sharing breath, I think we can dispense with formalities." A blush colored her cheeks. "Yates, then, and you must call me Olivia." "I'll return in 2 weeks' time, Olivia. Perhaps I could call on you then, see how you're settling in." Her smile brightened the room. "I would like that very much." As promised, Yates returned to Truckee 14 days later, having successfully delivered his cattle to the Sacramento stockyards. He found Olivia in the one-room schoolhouse at the edge of town, surrounded by 20 children ranging from 5 to 16 years of age. He watched through the window as she moved among them, her face animated as she explained something on the blackboard. Gone was any trace of the pale, weak woman he'd pulled from the river. In her place stood a confident teacher, hair neatly pinned, wearing a simple blue dress that complemented her slender figure. When she dismissed the children for the day, Yates stepped inside, hat in hand. Olivia's face lit up at the sight of him. "You came back," she said, gathering papers from her desk. "I said I would." He glanced around the simple schoolroom. "How are you finding teaching in Truckee? Challenging and rewarding in equal measure?" She smiled. "These children are eager to learn, though some have had little formal education. And the town has been welcoming, especially once they heard the story of my dramatic arrival." "Our story has made the rounds, has it?" Yates asked, stepping closer. "Oh, yes. According to town gossip, you're either a heroic cowboy or a dangerous outlaw, depending on who's telling the tale." Her eyes sparkled with amusement. "Mrs. Hargrove at the boarding house seems convinced you're both." Yates laughed, the sound echoing in the empty schoolroom. "And what do you think, Miss Owens?" "I think," she said softly, "that you are a good man who happened to be in the right place at the right time, and I'm very glad of it." In the weeks that followed, Yates found reasons to pass through Truckee more frequently than his business strictly required. Each visit, he would call on Olivia, sometimes bringing small gifts, a ribbon from Sacramento, wildflowers gathered along the trail, once even a puppy from his ranch's latest litter. "I can't accept a dog," Olivia protested, even as she cradled the squirming border collie pup against her chest. "The boarding house won't allow pets," she explained, though her eyes showed how much she wanted to keep the gift. "Then perhaps it's time you considered more suitable accommodations," Yates suggested. "I've spoken with Samuel Jenkins. He has a small cottage to let on the edge of town. It belonged to his daughter before she married and moved to San Francisco." Olivia stared at him. "You've been making inquiries on my behalf. The cottage has a garden," he continued, ignoring her question. "And it's a short walk to the school, plenty of room for a growing pup." "Yates Kincaid, are you trying to settle me more permanently in Truckee?" Her tone was teasing, but her eyes searched his face seriously. He stepped closer. "Perhaps I'm trying to ensure you have reasons to stay, at least until I can present more compelling ones." The summer of 1878 passed in a sweet haze of courtship. Olivia moved into the cottage, named the puppy Scout, and planted a small garden that yielded vegetables for her table and flowers for her windowsills. Yates arranged his business affairs to allow for longer stays in Truckee, gradually integrating himself into the community that had embraced Olivia so warmly. On warm evenings, they would sit on her porch swing, talking of their pasts and cautiously exploring possibilities for a shared future. Yates spoke of his ranch in Wyoming, the sprawling property his father had built from nothing, the herds he'd expanded through careful breeding, the home that stood empty save for when he returned from cattle drives. "It's a good life," he told her, watching how the setting sun painted gold across her features. "Hard work but rewarding." "It sounds lonely," Olivia observed gently. Yates was quiet for a moment. "It has been. Since my parents passed 5 years ago, it's just been me and the hands. I never much thought about it until recently." "And now," she prompted when he fell silent, his eyes met hers. "Now I find myself thinking about it constantly." As summer faded into autumn, their feelings deepened. Yates had never been a man of many words, expressing himself instead through actions, chopping wood for Olivia's stove, repairing her roof before the winter rains, teaching Scout to herd the neighbors' chickens back into their yard. For her part, Olivia brought light and laughter into his solitary existence. She read to him from her favorite books, challenged his opinions on politics and philosophy, and slowly unearthed the tender heart he'd kept carefully guarded since his mother's death. The town of Truckee watched their courtship with approving eyes. The dramatic tale of the river rescue had already cemented them as a romantic story in local lore, and their obvious affection for one another only enhanced the narrative. "You should marry that cowboy before winter sets in," advised Mrs. Hargrove when Olivia stopped by the boarding house for tea. "A woman alone faces hard times when the snow comes." Olivia merely smiled. "Mr. Kincaid and I are taking things at our own pace, Mrs. Hargrove." But that pace accelerated when news reached Truckee of early blizzards in the mountain passes. Yates arrived at Olivia's cottage one October evening, concern etched on his face. "I need to return to Wyoming," he told her without preamble. "My foreman sent word we need to move the herds to lower pastures before the worst storms hit." Disappointment washed over Olivia. They had planned to spend the winter holidays together, her first Christmas away from Philadelphia. "When will you leave?" "Tomorrow, at first light." He took her hands in his. "I'll be gone until spring thaw, Olivia. The passes won't be safe once the heavy snows come." The reality of their situation struck her fully for the first time. Their romance had blossomed in the gentle California climate, with Yates never more than a week or two away. Now they faced months of separation, with not even letters able to cross the snow-blocked mountain routes. "I understand," she said quietly, though her heart ached at the thought. Yates studied her face, seeming to come to a decision. "Come with me." "What? Come to Wyoming? Marry me, Olivia?" The words tumbled out with uncharacteristic urgency. "I've been trying to find the perfect moment, the perfect words, but time's run out. I love you. I think I've loved you since I breathed life back into your lungs that day by the river." Olivia stared at him, speechless. They had danced around declarations, shared kisses that grew increasingly passionate, spoken of future possibilities, but neither had yet said the words. "I have obligations here," she stammered. "The school, they can find another teacher," he pressed. "Or you can return in the spring if you wish. But I can't bear to leave you for 6 months, not now that I've found you." She pulled her hands from his, moving to the window where she could see the first autumn leaves spiraling down in the evening breeze. "You're asking me to abandon my position, my independence, everything I came west to find." Yates moved behind her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "I'm asking you to marry me, Olivia. not to give up who you are. My home, our home, can be whatever we make it together." She turned to face him, eyes searching his. "And what of children? Would you expect me to set aside teaching then as well?" "I would expect us to decide such things together," he answered carefully. "I don't want a wife who disappears into motherhood and household duties, Olivia. I want a partner, the strong, opinionated woman who quotes Shakespeare while feeding chickens and teaches mining children their letters with the same passion she brings to everything." A smile trembled on her lips. "You've thought about this every day since I pulled you from that river." He cupped her face gently. "Marry me, Olivia Owens. Come to Wyoming as my wife, and we'll build a life worthy of the second chance we've been given." The schoolchildren of Truckee were disappointed but understanding when Miss Owens announced she would be leaving at week's end. The school board, though frustrated at having to find another teacher mid-term, softened when presented with the romantic circumstances. "We always knew he'd steal you away," sighed the mayor's wife as she helped Olivia pack her belongings. "A love story like yours doesn't come along every day." They were married in Truckee's small church on a crisp October morning, with half the town in attendance. Olivia wore a simple cream dress with lace at the collar and cuffs, her hair adorned with mountain wildflowers gathered by her students. Yates, almost unrecognizable in a new suit, watched her walk down the aisle with a look of such tender devotion that several of the town's matrons dabbed at their eyes. "I thought I came west to find independence," Olivia told him as they shared their first dance as husband and wife at the reception. "Instead, I found you. Are you disappointed?" he asked, the familiar worry line appearing between his brows. She shook her head, rising on tiptoes to kiss him lightly. "I found both. You never ask me to be less than I am, Yates. That's a rare gift." They departed the next morning in a wagon loaded with Olivia's belongings, Scout perched happily among the trunks. The journey to Wyoming would take weeks, following the transcontinental railroad route eastward before turning north into the territory. The journey tested them in ways courtship never had. Cold rains soaked their camp, mud slowed their progress, and close quarters in the wagon revealed habits and moods previously hidden during their more formal courtship. Yet they emerged stronger for it, learning to navigate disagreements and discomforts with growing understanding. "I never realized how stubborn you are," Olivia remarked one evening as they argued over the best route through a particular mountain pass. Yates raised an eyebrow. "Says the woman who insisted on repacking the entire wagon because the weight distribution felt wrong to her." They stared at each other for a moment before breaking into laughter, the tension dissolving. "Perhaps we're well matched in our stubbornness," Olivia conceded, moving into his arms. "Perhaps that's why we'll succeed," he murmured against her hair. The land changed as they traveled east and north, the Sierra pine forests giving way to Nevada's stark beauty, then the rolling sage hills of southern Wyoming territory. Olivia watched the landscape transform with fascination, recording her observations in a journal each evening by firelight. "It's so vast," she remarked as they crested a rise that revealed miles of open prairie stretching to distant mountains. "I feel both insignificant and unlimited here." Yates smiled, understanding exactly what she meant. "That's Wyoming for you. Makes a person feel both humble and mighty at the same time." They reached the Kincaid Ranch in late November, just as the first serious snow began to fall. The sprawling property lay in a sheltered valley, bordered by a swift-running creek and backed by tree-covered foothills. The main house, larger than Olivia had imagined, stood on a gentle rise, its windows glowing with welcoming light as ranch hands rushed out to greet their returning boss. "Welcome home, Mrs. Kincaid," Yates said softly, helping her down from the wagon. Olivia stood for a moment, taking in what was now her home, the sturdy two-story house built of local stone and timber, the well-maintained outbuildings, the distant shapes of cattle in the protected lower pastures. Beyond the immediate ranch buildings, she could see smoke rising from what Yates had told her was the bunkhouse where most of the hands lived. Curtis, the foreman she'd briefly met during her rescue, approached with a wide grin. "Wasn't sure you'd make it before the passes closed," he said, clapping Yates on the shoulder before tipping his hat to Olivia. "Madam, it's good to see you in better circumstances than our last meeting." "Much better," she agreed with a smile. "Though I believe I have yet to properly thank you for your part in my rescue." "Boss did all the heroics," Curtis demurred. "I just helped get you to town." As they entered the house, Olivia was struck by the blending of frontier practicality with unexpected refinement. Sturdy furniture crafted from local woods shared space with delicate china displayed in a glass-fronted cabinet. Navajo rugs warmed the plank floors, and bookshelves lined one entire wall of the main sitting room. "My mother's influence," Yates explained, noting her surprise at the books. "She brought her library from Boston when she married my father. Said a mind needs feeding as much as a body does." "I think I would have liked your mother very much," Olivia said, running her fingers along the spines of volumes that ranged from classical literature to practical guides on animal husbandry. "She would have adored you," he replied softly. "The ranch's housekeeper, Mrs. Larson, a no-nonsense Swedish woman who had been with the family since Yates was a boy, welcomed Olivia with surprising warmth. "About time this house had a mistress again," she declared, showing Olivia through the kitchen with its massive wood stove and well-stocked pantry. "And young enough to fill the bedrooms upstairs with children, I hope." Olivia blushed, but Yates merely laughed, used to Mrs. Larson's directness. "One thing at a time, Mrs. Larson. Let my wife settle in before you start planning the nursery." That first winter taught Olivia much about her new husband and the life he had built. She watched him rise before dawn to check on cattle during blizzards, observed his fair but firm management of the ranch hands, and discovered the deep respect he commanded throughout the territory. For his part, Yates found his home transformed by Olivia's presence. Books that had sat untouched for years were read aloud by the fire on winter evenings. The piano in the parlor, silent since his mother's death, came alive under Olivia's skilled fingers. And most surprisingly, the local children began appearing at the ranch house 3 days a week for lessons. "We need a proper school in the valley," Olivia had declared after meeting several ranch families and discovering the nearest schoolhouse was 20 miles away. "Until then, I'll teach whoever can reach us safely." By spring, she had 8 regular students, children of ranch hands, neighboring homesteaders, and the local blacksmith. Yates converted an unused storage building into a simple classroom, pride evident in his face when he presented it to her. "It's not trucky," he said, watching her explore the space with its fresh planed benches and tables, "but perhaps it will do for now." Olivia turned to him, eyes bright with tears. "It's perfect. You're perfect." Life fell into a rhythm that suited them both. Mornings were for ranch work and teaching. Afternoons often found them riding together across the property, Olivia's confidence on horseback growing daily. Evenings were for shared meals, reading, music, and increasingly passionate explorations of their marriage bed. In late spring, as wildflowers carpeted the valley and calving season brought new life to the ranch, Olivia discovered she was with child. "Are you certain?" Yates asked, his voice tight with emotion when she told him. "Dr. Miller from town confirmed it yesterday while you were moving the herd." She watched his face anxiously. "He says the baby should arrive in early December." For a moment, Yates simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then, with a whoop that startled Scout from his place by the fire, he lifted Olivia into his arms and spun her around the room. "Careful." She laughed, clinging to his shoulders. "I'm in a delicate condition, remember," he set her down gently, hands lingering at her waist. "Are you happy?" he asked, suddenly serious. "Terrified," she admitted. "But yes, very happy." "Are you?" His answer was a kiss that left no doubt. The ranch hands took the news of their coming child as a personal triumph, as if they'd had some hand in the matter. Curtis organized the building of a cradle, carved from the same pine that lined the valley. Mrs. Larson began knitting with ferocious determination, producing tiny garments at an alarming rate. "This valley hasn't seen a Kincaid baby in nearly 30 years, she informed Olivia. "We're making up for lost time." As Olivia's body changed with the advancing pregnancy, she continued teaching, adapting as needed. By autumn, her small school had grown to 12 students, with parents contributing what they could: fresh eggs, handmade clothing, meat for the winter smokehouse. "You've changed this community," Yates told her one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains. His hand rested protectively on her rounded belly, where their child shifted and kicked. "They were good people before, but isolated. You've brought them together." Olivia leaned against his shoulder. "We've changed each other," she corrected. "I would never have found such purpose, such happiness, if you hadn't pulled me from that river." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Best dive I ever took." Their son was born during the first heavy snowfall of December, a healthy, robust boy with his father's green eyes and his mother's determined chin. They named him James Thomas Kincaid, after both their fathers. "He's perfect," Yates whispered, cradling his son with hands that seemed too large, too rough for such a delicate task. Yet the baby nestled contentedly against him, tiny fingers curling around one of his father's. Olivia watched them from the bed, exhausted but radiant. "He's strong, like his father." "And stubborn, like his mother," Yates added with a grin. "The midwife says she's never seen a baby so determined to arrive on his own schedule." The winter passed in a haze of sleepless nights and overwhelming love as they adjusted to parenthood. James, quickly nicknamed Jamie, thrived under their doting care and the adoration of the entire ranch community. Even Scout appointed himself guardian, sleeping faithfully beneath the cradle and alerting the household to the baby's slightest whimper. Spring brought new challenges and joys. Olivia resumed teaching, often with Jamie bundled against her chest or sleeping in a basket beside her desk. The students, far from being distracted by the baby's presence, competed for the privilege of holding him during breaks. "He'll be the best educated child in the territory," Yates remarked, watching his son being passed carefully among the older children while Olivia supervised. "With the biggest extended family," she added. As Jamie grew, so did the ranch and their community. Yates expanded his operation, investing profits in breeding stock and additional grazing land. Olivia's school moved to a proper building in the small settlement that was forming near the ranch, with a county-paid teacher joining her 3 days a week. Their second child, a daughter named Elizabeth Rose, arrived 2 years after Jamie. Where their son was boisterous and adventurous, Eliza was watchful and thoughtful, observing the world with serious dark eyes before deciding if it merited her participation. "She has your mind," Yates told Olivia as they watched 4-year-old Eliza methodically constructing a small dam in the creek, testing different arrangements of stones with scientific precision. "And your patience," Olivia replied. "I would have given up on the 3rd attempt." Life was not without challenges. Harsh winters, summer droughts, fluctuating cattle prices, and the ordinary strains of marriage tested them regularly. They argued sometimes fiercely about ranch management, child rearing, politics, and community matters. But beneath these surface conflicts lay an unshakable foundation built on that day by the river. Each had given the other a second chance at life, Yates literally breathing life back into Olivia's water-filled lungs, and Olivia awakening parts of Yates' heart and mind that had lain dormant for years. On the 5th anniversary of their meeting, Yates surprised Olivia with a journey back to Truckee. They left the children with Mrs. Larson and Curtis, now married to the blacksmith's daughter and father to twin boys himself. "Are you sure about this?" Olivia asked as they boarded the train that would carry them west. "The spring roundup can happen without me for once," Yates finished. "This is more important." Truckee had changed in the years, since Olivia had left, growing larger with the continued expansion of the railroad and lumber industries. Yet much remained familiar. The mountains rising majestically above the town, the clear air scented with pine, the rushing sound of the river that had nearly claimed her life. They stayed at the hotel rather than the boarding house, enjoying the luxury of uninterrupted time together. Olivia visited her former students, now young adults with paths of their own. Yates met with business contacts, establishing new connections for the ranch's expanding operation. But the true purpose of their journey came on a perfect spring morning when Yates led Olivia to the spot on the Snake River where their story had begun. "It doesn't look nearly as threatening now," Olivia observed, studying the clear water flowing smoothly between the banks. "Spring melt was particularly bad that year," Yates recalled. "The river was twice this width, running 3 times as fast." They stood in silence for a moment, each lost in memories of that day. Then Yates took her hands in his. "5 years ago I pulled you from this river and breathed life into your body," he said quietly. "I had no idea that in saving you I was saving myself as well." Tears filled Olivia's eyes. "When I came west, I was seeking independence, adventure, a life of my own making. I nearly died finding it. And instead, I found everything I never knew I needed." She squeezed his hands. "A partner who respects my mind as much as he cherishes my heart. Children who fill our home with noise and wonder, purpose that extends beyond myself. And love, so much more love than I ever imagined possible." Yates pulled her gently into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that held 5 years of shared life, the joy and struggle, passion and patience, growth and commitment that had forged their bond. When they finally parted, Yates reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside lay a delicate gold locket, engraved with their initials and the date of her rescue. "Something to commemorate the day," he explained as he fastened it around her neck. "Though I suspect neither of us needs a reminder." Olivia touched the locket, then reached up to trace the lines of his face, the face that had been her first sight when life returned to her water-filled lungs. "Every breath since that day has been a gift," she said softly. "One I've tried never to take for granted." "As have I," he replied, drawing her close again. They returned to their Wyoming home renewed, their commitment to each other and the life they'd built strengthened by the journey. The ranch continued to prosper under Yates' careful management, and Olivia's school grew into a proper educational center for the valley, eventually hiring 3 teachers besides herself. Jamie and Eliza were joined by a 3rd child, 2 years later another boy they named Daniel, who combined his brother's energy with his sister's thoughtfulness in a way that kept his parents constantly alert. As the children grew, so did the community around them. The settlement near the ranch officially incorporated as a town, with Yates reluctantly serving as its first mayor and Olivia heading the school board. Their home became a gathering place for neighbors, a stopping point for travelers, and a refuge for those in need. Through it all, the story of their beginning, the drowning schoolteacher and the cowboy who breathed life back into her lungs, remained a touchstone, repeated to new acquaintances and passed down to their children. "Tell us again how you saved Mama." The children would beg Yates on winter evenings by the fire, and he would recount the tale, embellishing slightly for dramatic effect until Olivia intervened with corrections, both of them laughing at the familiar exchange. "Your father likes to pretend he knew exactly what he was doing," she would tell the wide-eyed children, "but the truth is he was terrified." "Of course I was," Yates would admit. "The most beautiful woman I'd ever seen was slipping away right before my eyes. I couldn't let that happen." "So he breathed his life into mine," Olivia would finish softly, "and in doing so gave us both a second chance at living." Years passed, seasons turned, children grew. The Kincaid Ranch expanded into one of the territory's most successful operations, known for both its progressive management and its hospitality. Olivia's educational initiatives became a model for other frontier communities, earning recognition from as far away as Washington. On their 25th wedding anniversary, with their children grown, Jamie running much of the ranch operation, Eliza studying medicine in Boston, and Daniel preparing to enter law school, Yates and Olivia once again stood by the Snake River where their story began. "Would you do it again?" Olivia asked, her hand warm in his despite the autumn chill. Her hair now held streaks of silver, and fine lines marked the passage of years around her eyes, but to Yates, she remained as beautiful as the day he'd pulled her from the water. "Dive in after a stubborn, half-drowned schoolteacher?" he teased, his own hair now more salt than pepper, his tall frame still strong though bearing the evidence of decades of hard work. "Absolutely. Best decision I ever made." Olivia smiled up at him, the love of 25 years shining in her eyes. "Even with all the arguments, the hardships, the times we drove each other to distraction." "Especially because of those," he answered honestly. "They taught us how to bend without breaking, how to disagree without dividing. Every challenge we've faced has only made what we built stronger." She leaned against him, and his arm circled her shoulders automatically, the gesture worn smooth with years of repetition. "We've had a good life, haven't we?" "The best," Yates confirmed. "And it's far from over, Mrs. Kincaid. I intend to annoy you for at least another 25 years." Olivia laughed, the sound carrying across the water. "I'm counting on it, Mr. Kincaid. After all, you still owe me a breath or two." He turned her gently in his arms, pressing his forehead to hers in the intimate gesture that had become their private shorthand for all that lay between them. "Every breath I have is yours, Olivia. It has been since that first one I gave you on this riverbank." And as the autumn sun dipped toward the mountains that had witnessed their beginning, they sealed this renewal of promise with a kiss that held the wisdom of their past, the richness of their present, and the enduring hope of their future, all born from that fateful moment when a drowning woman and a determined cowboy found each other on the banks of the Snake River.